President Trump says he called off a strike against Iran because too many people would have died. He tweeted earlier saying the military was ready to hit 3 sites last night, but at the last minute told troops to stand down because he was told after speaking to a general that 150 people would have been killed.
The president says a U.S. military strike with casualties would not have been equivalent to Iran downing an unmanned drone. And he also said new sanctions were added last night. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin is with us now from the Pentagon. We've been talking all morning about this with David. David, can you take us through the president's tweets? 3 sites were targeted, 150 people would have died, and new sanctions were added. What do these revelations tell us about what happened last night as the decision to launch the strike was first sort of given the okay and then called off?
What that says is that this was going to be a strike against that part of the Iranian air defense system that had been involved in the shoot down of the drone. So you would go after the actual battery that launched the missile that shot down the drone. You would go after the radar that tracked the drone and guided the missile to its target. And you would go after the command post that directed the shoot down. Now, usually when the U.S. conducts a strike, it does it in the middle of the night for 2 reasons. 1, take advantage of the cover of darkness, but 2, most people are asleep and you have a better chance of not killing any innocent bystanders. But when you're striking a military target like air defense sites, of course, those are manned 24/7. So no matter what time those weapons hit, they would have been fully manned. Now, what surprises me about that tweet is that the president found this out, he says, just 10 minutes before the launch order was to be given, because the risk of casualties is a pretty standard part of any briefing on any option that the military presents to the president. And it's hard for me to understand how that could have just surfaced at 10 minutes before launch.
Yeah, David, and I know that where you are, there's always a little bit of noise, so I apologize to our viewers. But you know, that is the question that we all had as well, which is the commander-in-chief. Look, when I was in ROTC, we were told to write warning orders about what we were doing. We always had to brief our commanders on what potential casualties could be on any operation that was undertaken. So it just is a sort of a head scratcher for someone to hear from the president, the commander-in-chief, saying that it was some general that he casually asked in the middle of the discussions as to whether or not this strike is going to happen. You know, how many casualties will there be? Oh, 150, sir. Oh, no way. We can't do this. Let's call it off.
He doesn't name the generals, but there would have been 2 generals directly involved in putting this operation together. One would have been the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, who is, of course, the president's principal military advisor. The other would have been General Frank McKenzie, who is the commander of U.S. Central Command, which is the command that directs operations in the Persian Gulf. And I assume, but I don't know, that that is the general he was referring to, one of those 2.
So, you know, when I think about this and what's happening and how tense things are, it reminds us that we do not have a Secretary of Defense, right? There are a number of posts that are being manned currently by acting secretaries. We don't really have an acting or an interim, really.
Right.
You know, what sort of impact does that have on the tension that we see happening in the Middle East?
Well, it was confusing to me yesterday how this is going to work, because both Patrick Shanahan, still acting Secretary of Defense until Sunday night at midnight, but a lame duck if there ever was one, he was attending the meetings on what to do, and so was the person that the president has named to be the acting secretary once Shanahan leaves, the current Secretary of the Army, Mark Esper. So both of those people were going to these meetings. So it was kind of a two-headed Secretary of Defense. And of course, in military operations, the keynote is unity of command. Everybody works for just one person. So not an ideal situation organizationally.
And David, I guess I know that because we here at CBS News, not only do you report on the air for us, but you're also reporting back to the Bureau information as you learn it from your sources at the Pentagon, that Iran has put out a lot of information about what they say happened. They've tried to put out videos and they've tried to put out propaganda statements. How much should we, people in this country, our allies, what kind of trust, if any, should we put into anything coming out of the Iranian regime?
Well, you should be extremely skeptical of it. The first picture I saw yesterday of what was purporting to be the drone as it was falling from the sky turned out to have been a picture that was taken over Yemen 2 years ago and simply repurposed to fit this. When I saw the video that Iran was playing on their state television of the launch of the missile that supposedly shot down the drone, I was very, very suspicious for this simple reason, that they claimed that showed them shooting down the drone. If you go by the American account of where that drone was, it was at least 30 miles away from that missile site and at an altitude of about 50,000 feet. I don't think a camera there on ground level with the missile is really going to be able to track that kind of an intercept. So there is lots to be suspicious about in these Iranian videos. And now the latest video we've seen is remnants of the wreckage, which actually have a little more credibility to me, because what I was hearing yesterday was that the seas were rough and the winds were high, and that had made for a very dispersed debris field after the drone landed in the water. And so you can see where some of that might have washed into an area where the Iranian Navy could get to it before a U.S. ship or a friendly ship in the area. So you got to question all this stuff that comes from Iran. To me, the most interesting thing about it is that the president was saying this could have been an accident. Somebody who hadn't gotten the memo about not shooting down American drones, a trigger-happy officer somewhere in the ranks who fired this thing off. But here's Iranian state television celebrating the event. I don't think they would be celebrating it if it were an accident.
Yeah, you know, that's the thing about the president, David. At times, it's difficult to figure out what the single message is that he's trying to send. He talks about sending an additional 1,000 troops to the region. It talks about how ready our military is in the region, but then sort of gives Iran an out. Oh, maybe it was a mistake, and then sort of says, you know, I was ready to go, but I didn't want to be responsible for 150 deaths. I didn't think it was proportional, so I sort of scaled back. And now we have Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, heading to the region. He's going to be going to the UAE and to Saudi Arabia to presumably deliver the message coming from this administration. But I'm not sure what that message is. What's he going to be telling our allies in the region?
Well, I think he's probably going to be selling the idea of tougher sanctions against Iran to continue the maximum pressure campaign. And look, the maximum pressure campaign is working. If by working you mean making the Iranian economy scream, because it is having severe difficulties, and these attacks by the Iranians that you're seeing over the past weeks are surely responses to these economic pressures, and they've either got to cave into the economic pressures and agree to negotiate, or they've got to fight back. And for now, at least, they've decided to fight back. But you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing that the president didn't launch these strikes. Maybe there is a way to do this without having to use military force. I think that would be better for everyone, because once you start using military force, the unintended consequences start to flow, and you just never know where it's going to end.
David, let me ask you, because you've covered the Pentagon for so many years, and so I'm going to tap a little bit of your institutional history and knowledge here. But when I saw the news this morning that several American and other countries had asked that U.S. airlines and others do not fly over the Strait of Hormuz, my first thought went back to when I was a senior in high school, right about the time that I was a senior in high school, to Iran Flight 655, which was shot down over the Strait of Hormuz by a U.S. warship in the region. It turned out that the United States said obviously that was an accident. The Iranians took it in a very different light. They thought it was a deliberate situation. But I immediately thought of that. Are tensions that high where there's a risk that a U.S. carrier could accidentally, or something else, be knocked out of the sky?
It is. I mean, the technology is a lot better today, so you would have a much better track on an airliner. The ship that shot down that Iranian airliner, it was called the Vincennes. And in the investigation afterwards, it became clear that the Vincennes had a reputation for sort of being quick on the trigger. And as a matter of fact, within the Fifth Fleet, which is the fleet out there, it was called robo-cruiser. So it may have been that particular crew was just a little too ready to fire, but you've got a target coming in on you that you think is an F-14, an Iranian F-14. You know, you're going to shoot it down, and of course that was a horrible tragedy, because it turned out to be an airliner. But you could still have a plane inbound on a U.S. ship, an Iranian plane inbound on a U.S. ship now. But I think the technology would be a lot better able to distinguish what it was. Look at what we saw in this drone shoot down. That drone was up at 50,000 feet, yet we have two pictures of it taken by other American aircraft that were operating in the region at the time, that one saw the actual shoot down, and two saw the corkscrew of the smoke trail as it came down. So they've got this place blanketed with sensors now, and you'd like to think that reduces the chances of another tragedy like the shoot down of that Iranian airliner.
Sorry to put you on the spot there, David, but I knew you'd know the answer and you'd have a lot of insight. I did not know that about robo-cruiser.
Neither.
Yeah, that's really fascinating insight. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Sure thing.